Muted.
The point of today's webinar was I'd had a request from a user to help her understand which reports may be useful for her to run to get certain data. And that's actually a really good question, and it's also a hard question to answer because, first off, what data do you want? And I don't have all of these reports memorized because there's about 100 and some reports in the art gallery, not to mention the ones that we have had custom built. So it's hard for me to answer a question when a user asks, what report can I run to get data? So you first have to know what data you want, and then we have to just figure out which report is going to best get you that data. And in some cases, that data may have to come out of 2 different reports, maybe 3, depending on the data that you want. And the other thing that you need to keep in mind is that all of the HUD reports, that data is based on HUD standards or HUD defined categories. And one of the hardest questions that we are asked by different funders are date ranges of ages. And so United Way wants to know how many 2-year-olds we served, and DHCD wants to know 1 to 5-year-olds. So that question is very difficult to answer because each funder may have a different date range for ages of people we serve. So that is one example. But there are reports that will dump out all the clients you served and their ages. So then if you can use Excel, you can then filter and sort the age groups and then count them yourself. So, sometimes you have to put in a little footwork in order to get the answer that you need, because there's not going to be a report that's going to give you exactly what you want, because what you want is not necessarily what, say, HUD wants. Okay, so always keep that in mind when you need data. Okay, so the people that are on this call are users that have art. Okay, so this webinar is today and also next week. I'm redoing the same art webinar. In case you couldn't make today's, you could make next week's. So it's the same one. And then the other webinar that you were invited to as well, which may or may not be useful to you, is the one for the end users when they get reports, of how to read those reports. Okay? So what I'm going to start here with is I'm logged into ART, and as you can see, we have our public folder, and then we have our admin folder. Okay? And before we go any further, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of, if you click on this little arrow, okay, it looks like, okay, so I'm going to log out of Service Point and log back in. Okay. That's what we call an internet error. And so you just log out and log back in. So I'm sure I've showed this to everyone on the call, but I do want to remind you that the Art Gallery Index is right here. And when you download it, it's going to give you a PDF of all of the reports that Bowman has created. Okay, so these are all the Bowman reported reports that they've created. And as you can see, it's been recently, very recently updated. So anytime there's a change to any of the reports, they will update this Art Gallery Index. And this will give you a list of all the reports that Bowman has created with a little descriptor of what this report is going to do, what kind of data it's going to give you. So sometimes if you're looking for some data, you might want to start here first and see which report might give you the data that you want, okay? And as some of you may or may not know, we now have the reports that are going to give us the HARS outcomes that HUD is looking for, and these are our 700 reports. So as you can see, we have 700, 701, 702, 703, and 704, 706, okay? So each one of these reports is going to give us some different data based on the expectations of the HARS outcomes, okay? So you can download, print this art gallery report, and read what these 700 reports will provide you. So for example, this 700 report right here, this report is going to give us the average and mean of how long someone has been homeless that's in our program. That's what it's going to do. So very simple. It's just, that's all it's going to give you. Then these other reports are going to give us different metrics based on the type of project that you're running the report on. So it's very important that you have to pick the right report based on your project type. So for example, I went to run one of these 700 reports on a rapid rehousing program, and I didn't realize that the report I picked was really basically a report only for shelter providers. So it came back and said 0, and I was like, oh, ran the wrong report, okay? So the metrics are based on the type of project that you're running the report for. Okay, so I'm going to close that. Okay, what I have already done is I have already run these reports that I want to show you today, because I feel that everyone on the call should know how to run art reports. That's not really the point of the webinar, and we know that art sometimes is very slow. So I thought I would go ahead and have the reports already run, and then that way we can just actually talk about the reports. One of the things that I want to remind you is here recently I've had several users run reports and get strange data, or they got no data, and it is the effective date. Most reports prompt you to enter in an effective date, okay? So remember that your effective date is always whatever the end date in your report is, okay? So before we go any further, June, it looks like you have a question, and I can't unmute you because you have not entered in your PIN, okay? Terry, do you have a question? Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. So June, if you have a question, you need to enter in your PIN number that came with your email to register for the webinar, because I can't unmute you. Okay. So the first report that I'm going to run is in our development folder, and it is simply called the quarterly report. Okay. Now, why am I running this one? I'm running this one because how many of you want to know the zip codes where your clients come from? Yes, you would be saying if I could hear you. That's because we have some funders in the area that want to know where the clients are that we serve. So this report that is simply called the quarterly report will give you, besides other data, the zip code from where your clients are coming from. And as you can see, we actually have 2 fields, because in the database, we not only are asking you for the zip code, but there's also a locality field. And the reason is because somebody may give you 23234, but they don't know the locality. Or they may say, I'm from the city of Richmond, but I don't know what that zip code is. So we have not only the actual county, but then we also have the zip code. So if you were counting your clients and you want to know how many people have come from the city of Richmond, you would have to know the zip codes for the city, because I'm pretty sure 23224 is a city zip code. So I would want to count these 7 people in with the category up here at the top that says the Richmond city. So we would have 7 plus 5. Okay. Now, just in case you're not aware, there is a Richmond County. It has nothing to do with the city. It's Richmond County, and I think it's over on the eastern, the northern neck part of the state. I'm not sure exactly. So keep that in mind, that when you run this report, you're going to have to know where your zip codes are. And so what I have to do is go to probably the postal website, pull up a listing of zip codes, and then as I'm counting how many people are from the city, I then have to look at all these zip codes. Okay, and then as you can see, for this particular provider that I ran this report for, we have 5 blank and 4 blank. Okay, so we have potentially 9 missing, or we could have the same 4 missing in both top and bottom because they didn't put in a county or a zip code. So when you are running this report and you have a lot of missing numbers, then you should go back to your users and say you need to make sure you're putting in the zip codes and or both, really, the county and the zip code. Okay, so this question gets asked a lot, and now you don't have to ask it anymore. It's on the report called the quarterly report. This report also has a lot of data on it that is very similar to the VSHP quarterly report. So again, this is the age breakdown that we came up with based on originally how we set this report up. So here we have our age breakdowns: females, males, adults, and children. Then we have race and ethnicity and veteran status. And then we have some income data. We have referrals that were made, income details. Okay. Entry-exit details. Okay, so the entry-exit details are basically, this is telling you which clients have an entry and which clients don't have an exit. So as you can see on this particular report, there's quite a few clients that do not have an exit date. Okay, and I would imagine that whoever I ran this report for, that a client that entered in July of 2015 has left the program. Okay, and also with every report that you run out of the database, please remember that the very last tab is going to tell you some very important information, and that is who, what, when, and where. So who was this report run for? Provider name. The date range, so as you can see, I have run this report from July of 2015 through today, and my effective date is always my end date. Okay? And then it also gives me a total client count of 103 people. Okay? So this last tab has very important information, because for the 2 users that have recently contacted me about report problems, when I looked at their effective date, they had accidentally put their effective date as their start date. So basically the report ran for no date range, because your effective date is the date that your data is good for. So if you had accidentally set this to 7/1/15, you're saying that I essentially only want July 1st data. So your effective date is always your end date, whatever your end date is that you're running a report for. Okay. So this is the quarterly report. Okay. It has a lot of useful information in it. And most importantly, this is where when you need to know what zip codes your clients are coming from, this is where you're going to get that data. And this might be a clue to you, but this report was run for a Petersburg provider because most of their clients are from Petersburg. So, okay, so I'm going to close that one. And June, do you still have a question?
No.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. Okay, so the next one is the VSHP quarterly report, which I think everybody on the call has to run this report quarterly. And you are also going to be required to turn in an annual report in a couple of months to DHCD. And the annual report is going to be based on the quarterly data. So one thing that's very, very important to remember about the VSHP quarterly report is even though you may only want Q3's data, the way this report was designed, and some of you have probably encountered this problem, you have to run the report for all the quarters. So your start date is always going to be your grant start date, which is going to be your first quarter. So even though I may only want third quarter data, I have to run the report since the grant started essentially July 1. So I have first quarter data, second quarter data, third, and we're in fourth quarter, so I have a few clients here. Okay? So we have individuals and households, we have age and gender. So again, this report and the quarterly report were built on the same kind of platform, but we also wanted zip codes. And then we have our races, our ethnicities, subpopulations, disabilities, destinations, length of stay, bed nights. Bed nights. We've added this tab back to this report. We realized about a month ago that this tab disappeared. We had one provider specifically that was using bed nights, and we thought the report wasn't calculating correctly, but then I guess it is calculating correctly. So you now have bed nights. So if you are an actual shelter, this tab has possibly some useful information for you, because I think there is one funder who wants to know how many total bed nights that was. So we now have this tab added back to this particular report. We have client detail tab, and remember that every report in the database is always going to have a client detail tab. So if you're looking to figure out what's missing and which client it is, we have client ID number, and then in this case, this particular client has no exit. Okay? That doesn't mean anything bad, it just means that this client doesn't have an exit. So every report is going to have this detail tab, so it's a good idea to check it to see how your data is looking, because as the program manager, maybe, and that's why you're running these reports, you might be making the assumption that your data is fine, but as you're running this report, you can reinforce the idea that we need to make sure that we don't have any missing data. So here's an example. We are missing an ethnicity. An ethnicity is one of the easiest things to answer. So it shouldn't be blank. Okay? And it looks like this last column here on this particular vendor is missing the veteran question. And we know how important the veteran question is because there's a veteran initiative to end veteran homelessness. So as you can see, it looks like for this particular provider, we're missing the veteran question. Okay. And then it also tells you something that's also very important, and that is our destination of our clients, because we also know that during the ranking process for DHCD and the NOFA process that will be coming up, one of the important ranking points is where are your clients going when they leave your program? And so, you know, depending on the program type, we want to see clients going to a positive outcome. So this report also has that data, and again, it's reinforcing the importance of that particular question. Okay, so the DHCD report should be familiar to you, but you need to think outside the box when you need data. So don't say to yourself, oh, I'm not going to run the VSHP report because that's only for DHCD money. No, it's not. It just happens to be that we created that report to meet that need, but it has very useful data for all kinds of other needs. And again, the last tab tells us who, what, when, and where. And so I have grant start date of 7/1. The start date of the report is 7/1, my end date, and then most importantly, my effective date is always my end date. Okay? So again, that's the VSHP quarterly report. Okay? Now I'm going to run the APR. So this is not the detail report. This is not the report that most every user of the database gets. This is the report that you're going to use when you need to submit your APR data to eSNAPS at the end of your grant cycle if you get HUD money. So for those of you on the call that get HUD money, you should know what I'm talking about when I say you have to log into eSNAPS and answer a whole bunch of questions. Those questions are answered on this report, which is the 625, it has a number, and it's the HUD COC APR. So it's what I refer to as the summary APR. So as you can see, it tells us how many clients, how many adults. We have no unaccompanied youth, so that's very exciting for this particular report, because that means you would have served a 2-year-old by themselves. And out of 468 people, 444 people left the program. So that's, you know, that's pretty good. We don't have 468, and then this number down here is 3. So that would mean we haven't exited people. Okay. So what it's now telling us is don't know answers and refused and missing data. So we have a couple of problems with socials, and I will bet you anything these are probably children. So it's possible that we may never get those Social Security numbers, okay? But for race and ethnicity, these numbers should be 0 because there's just no reason why you shouldn't have race and ethnicity. Veteran status, again, this is very critical for ending homeless veterans. So, and then income. Income is some of our worst data in the database. So having numbers here doesn't surprise me. So 14 and 12 is actually not too bad. If you run some reports, those numbers are like 30, 40, 50. And then we have 1 for all these categories. So overall, this isn't too bad. But we have 4 blank destinations. Wait. And 227 are don't know refused. Interesting. So to me, that's a red flag, and I would need to be thinking to myself, why am I missing my destinations? Because the client had to have left my program, So that means I answered don't know to half of the clients who left my program. Now, if you're an emergency shelter program, that might make sense, because as an emergency shelter program, you sometimes have clients that run away in the middle of the night. So you don't know where they went. So that's a legitimate answer. Okay, but having half my clients with that answer, I should be running my detail APR, which is the 631, to try to figure out why half my clients have a don't know answer, because that might not be acceptable. Okay, and then we have tab B, which is has a couple of things on it. It has number of persons and households served during the operating year. Okay, average number of people served each night. Kind of a weird question, but it's there. Point in time, so this is the last Wednesday in each of the months. Number of households served, 467. Interesting. So if I go back here, I had 468 people. So I must have run this report for a singles only program. That clues me in. Okay. Then tab C, client contacts and engagements. So this tab doesn't apply if you are not an outreach project, because contacts and engagements only apply to outreach. So I'm just going to ignore what's on that tab. Okay. Then we have genders. Okay. So what I'm looking for here is, do I have any blanks or don't knows? And I don't, so that's good. Then we have gender of our children, which I already told you this is a singles only program, so there are no children. Okay. And I don't have any missing ages, so that's exciting too. Then we have ages, ethnicities, and race. Then we have our disability breakdowns. So this is mental health and physical at entry, physical and mental health so this is a combination. They have more than one condition combined. Okay, and then DV, and when the DV occurred. Okay, and then tab G, residence prior to project entry. So if I'm running a homeless program, then I'm going to want to make sure that all of my clients are in the homeless categories. So I have them in the first section, the second section, but I have 11 who had their own rental before they came to my program, and I have 3 who were in a subsidized rental apartment. And if I'm a homeless only project, I'm going to make sure that all these answers are legit, okay? Because remember, if I'm a homeless only program, can I take that many doubled up people? Or should I be taking that many doubled up people? That's the kind of question you should be asking yourself, okay? Veteran status, and this is of leavers, okay? So it's the same as the previous tab, except this one is of leavers, okay? So those are the people that exited my program. Okay, tab I is your income, and this tab is just very confusing, and it has just, the way it represents the data is just very convoluted, and you really have to think hard on the answers that you're looking at here. So we have cash income, and then we have change of income. Okay. So right here, for this row right here, adults with earned income, 2 people retained their income at follow-up. Okay, that's what that's saying. And then did not have income at follow-up. 20 people, I guess, lost their money. Okay. And then we have other income, and then we have any income. Okay. And then this is income by change. So this is at exit. You have to read. So earned income, 49 people retained their income by time of exit. But it looks like right here that 378 people had no income at exit. So that is intriguing. So again, I would want to have my details report, and I would want to make sure that the data is being reported correctly. Because as we do know, income is some of the worst data in the database because of the way it's being recorded with those 4 sub-assessments. And we got to make sure that people are updating the income at the appropriate times. Okay. J, tab J, is our at cash income at exit. Okay. And then we have stayers. So these are the people that are still in my program. Okay. And then tab K is non-cash benefits. Okay. So for those of you that just recently went through the ranking process with state money, the ranking committee was looking at, and I believe points were given or not given, however the case is, based on whether or not you had clients that had an increase in income. And this is where we're getting this data from. So these are reports that you can run regularly to check the status of your incomes before a ranking process. And for those of you in Richmond, the NOFA application process is going to be starting, what, midsummer? So it's not that far off. Okay. Tab K, non-cash benefits. Tab L is length of participation at exit. So out of my 468 people, 426 left in less than 30 days. Well, that's awesome, because I believe HUD's new standard is that we should be serving people in less than 30 days. So that's pretty cool. But we have 8 people that have been there for quite some time. So that might not be, we might just be missing exit dates. Okay. Tab M is our destinations. So of these people who stayed, destination of household types and length of stay of all leavers who stayed more than 90 days. Okay. Destination of household types and length of stay of all leavers who stayed 90 days or less. Okay. So this is where the bulk of our clients are. Okay. And then tab N is permanent housing and rapid rehousing programs. Okay. So again, you're not going to have data in street outreach or services only or safe haven if you are not that program type. And then again, the last tab is who, what, when, and where. So again, I ran this report from July 1 of 2015 through May 9th. So my end date is my effective date. Okay. So this report actually has a lot of data on it, and it answers the questions you need for eSNAPs. Okay. It's also the report we use for the ranking committee, the APR. Okay. Okay. I also ran this report, which is kind of a really cool report. It is your exit destinations outcomes. So for the project that I ran this for, we had a total number of 53 exits. Okay. 8 went to rental by client with no subsidy, 3 went to substance abuse, and 8 went to other. So 42 are positive, 3 are negative, and 8 are indeterminate, okay? So these are based on whatever Bowman created was the logic to determine positive and negative. And I'm pretty sure that the positive here is based on HUD saying that we want positive outcomes. So we want, we want our clients exiting to permanent destinations, okay? So this is a pretty cool report that you can run to check your data and know whether or not, your clients are exiting to positive outcomes, for lack of a better word, okay? So we have gender, household status, okay? So it looks like this program was run basically for a family program. So we have single adult with children, and then we have multiple adults and children in this particular house. Then we have race, ages. So yet another report, yet another report that has age breakdown. So we've already seen 2 reports that have an age breakdown, but maybe that age breakdown did not match our needs. This report has a different kind of age breakdown. Maybe this one could be used just for nothing else but our age breakdown, okay? Veteran status. So we had 21 no's. Service type. So these are based on the services that were entered, okay? And then how many of those services were entered. Income. More income. Monthly income. So this is adding up whatever is in each individual field for income. I can barely read that. What does it say? Rental. Okay, so this is again telling us where those 42 clients went. So that seems a little redundant. That was on that first tab. Tab M is our details. Okay, so remember, there is always a detailed tab in almost every single report you run. So I didn't realize that until just now, so let me delete. I hope I deleted that fast enough. I wasn't trying to point anybody out in particular, so that's why I deleted all identifying information except on that tab. So again, this report is our details, and it's going to tell us, here's our exit destinations. So where are those 3 people that went to a substance abuse treatment? Should that be the right answer, or is it a typo? Okay, and then it's also going to show us if we have any missing data by simply having a blank field. Okay, and then we have those others. So literally, other was selected as the type of destination when a client left a program. So that's not necessarily a good answer. Out of all of those choices, you're saying that nothing fits where these 4 or 5 clients went. And then the last tab is our additional information, which tells us who, what, when, and where. Okay. And this last report here is a new one for me. I haven't run this report before, but I'm actually thinking of including it in our monthly reports that we send to people. And it's a really cool report because it's called Workflow Elements. So even though we have all these other reports that look for missing data, this report is looking for missing data in a slightly different way. And what it's doing is it's based on workflow. And so basically you can think of workflow as my data entry steps, okay? So does a client have an entry, an exit? Do we have needs, services, referrals, shelter stays, call records, goals, or ROIs, okay? So this report is going to give you some different data and different data quality. So it looks like, if I'm reading this report correctly, that client 119 has a missing ROI. So we know how very important an ROI is, so why is this ROI missing? Okay, so I believe that that is how you read this report. Okay, I'm going to go all the way to the bottom to see if there's a legend. I don't know if any of you have realized that some of the Bowman reports now have legends. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the data on certain tabs, there's a legend down here that helps explain to you what each answer in each field represents. So I have found those legends to be very useful. They help you understand how to read the report. So on this particular report, there's no legend. So I'm going to make the assumption right now that whenever there's a dash, there's missing data. Now, that doesn't mean for these 3, 4, 5 columns that that's a bad thing. This particular provider may not do these things, which are maybe optional, okay? So just because there's dashes doesn't mean that that's bad and this data needs to be fixed, okay? That's a very important concept. Just because something's missing doesn't necessarily mean you have to fix it. So for this particular provider, I would imagine that these columns aren't required, okay? But ROI is required by everybody. So if we have some dashes here, we should look into that as to why it appears that the ROI is missing, okay? Okay, so I might start sending this one out as a monthly report, okay? And here is one of the 700 reports that I was just mentioning to you. So this is actually the 700 report, just it's number 700, and it's length of time person was homeless, okay? So for clients in emergency shelter and safe havens, for this particular provider that I ran it for, there was 212 people, and their average and their mean, so they were on average 47 days as being homeless. That's what that is saying. And then the same 212, but then they add in the extra category in case some of them were in transitional. It's again 212. And so these 212 people, their average length of homelessness was 47 days. So that's useful for something. I'm not sure what, but you might have a need for it. And so here's our detail tab, okay? Because every report should have a detail tab, okay? And then again, our last tab tells us who, what, when, and where, okay? So those are some of your basic reports where you can garner a lot of information for different funding sources. So the one thing that you have to keep in mind is sometimes you might have to run 2 or 3 reports to figure out what data it is, where the data is, okay? Because if you send me an email or Margot an email and says, I need to know X, Y, and Z, that's what we do. I'm going to run this report. No, the data's not there that I really want. Oh, well, I got one answer from this report, one answer from this report, and one answer from this report. And then sometimes I have to dump it to Excel and manually count, okay? So Margot and I don't have any magic wand that says, ooh, here's your number. When you ask us for data, that's what we have to do a lot of times is some manual work. So, you know, don't think you're just going to ask us for a quick answer and then we get you what appears to be a quick answer when we had to do some of the same work that I'm describing to you here. So, you know, again, I don't have all these reports memorized. So when you ask me where can I get data from, you know, one of the go-to reports that I always tell people is the APR because the APR has so much data on it. Another one that I tell people is the VSHP quarterly report because that report has so much data on it. So if it goes beyond those, then we have to look at the Art Gallery Index and say, okay, well maybe we can get it from here. So, you know, just keep that in mind that we don't have a magic wand. We just can't conceive of something that quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open